Once upon a time, there was a red bedsheet. I purchased this bedsheet from the thrift store. Much time has passed since then, for although I was enamored of its brilliant color, I could not decide what to make with it. And recently, I was really wanting to make myself a cloak because, well, I haven't made a cloak in a while, and one really should make a cloak every so often for one's health. I happened to catch a glimpse of the red bedsheet as I was dreaming of this cloak, and of course, that made me think of the tale of Little Red Riding Hood, and of course, many questions fired off within my little mind. Did she even like being called Little Red Riding Hood? Did she like being called little? Did she even like her red hood? From whose point of view was the story told? This really isn't a new thing with me in fairy tales. I tend to imagine them often from different characters' perspectives. It's really a joyful exercise for me, in fact, especially one fairy tale in particular. But I have never done this exercise until now with Little Red Riding Hood. I was intrigued, so I decided to make a Red Riding Hood costume with a slightly different telling of the story in my mind. Of course, for the cloak and hood, I have the red fabric. And then for the skirt, I have some beige fabric and a pillowcase. And for the stays, I searched and searched the thrift store so many times for anything that could possibly work. Fabric, linens, clothing to cut up. Could not find anything even close to the color I was hoping for. So I ended up purchasing it from Walmart. So I have this. I began with the most arduous task of this project, which was the patterning of the stays. I had a very particular look in mind, and although I have patterned at least 3 different sets of stays recently, any of which would be completely fine, I decided to pattern yet another pair of stays, because I am just really good at wasting time and doing things that are unnecessary. Also, I am really good at poking myself with pins and not realizing until later that I'm bleeding. Good thing this was just a bedsheet muslin for me and not some gorgeous white silk fabric that I was commissioned to turn into a wedding dress. I'm very grateful for the times I was able to sew such commissions, but the stress levels? Yikes. I have finished patterning the stays. I have all my pattern pieces ready to go. However, I do not think I want to work on the stays right now. I think I'm gonna switch over to working on the cloak because stays have an awful lot of steps and I just really don't want to do that right now. I want to do something that's going to be simpler and put together quicker so I can hopefully complete something and maybe that will give me motivation to continue the more complex pieces. I need some of that instant gratification. Well, not instant, but you know, faster gratification to hopefully give me some motivation because that is in short supply right now. So what I'm going to do to make the hood is use a pattern that I made from a favorite hoodie of mine. I loved the hood especially and how it just kind of fell onto the shoulders. I love the shape of it, so I actually had to throw that hoodie out, but I took it apart and patterned the hood so that I could use it to make a cloak hood. And so I am going to try to use that. Basically, it goes like this, folds right here, and you sew it right along here. And this part goes on the shoulders. It'll make sense eventually. All right. Side note about the hood, I was convinced this was such an original pattern piece that I had to pattern this hoodie hood because I surely could not come up with it myself. But I happened to be looking at an old video the other day that I had posted on TikTok over a year ago where I freehanded a cloak hood and it's basically the exact same pattern. I was just so convinced that I would never be able to come up with the same shape on my own, and yet I did over a year ago. For the cape part, I'm basically going to be making a flared skirt. That's the simplest method, I think, to making a cloak. There are a lot of different shapes that you can use to get different styles of cloaks, but I'm just going to use the simplest one I know of. Basically, it's very similar to making an A-line skirt. Just measure around your neck instead of your waist, and I do it pretty loose because I just measure where I want the cape to kind of sit, and I like it loose. So just about like that. Feels pretty good. Basically, it's like a skirt pattern, but also not at all like that. If you were to make a skirt, the opening would be a lovely symmetrical section of a circle, like I draw in chalk here, and like the first sketch I'm going to do on this paper. But for the purposes of this cloak, I needed something more along the lines of the second sketch, where the line goes a bit straight at first before curving up. Oh, but don't curve it up as extreme as I do here. Sometimes when I freehand things, they turn out spiffy. Other times they are not so spiffy, and I have to adjust them later. The top of the cloak should look much more like this. Okay, so I redrew the chalk mark because I had to pull the fabric up because I realized I was going to be wasting a ton of fabric because this was down here, so I was going to waste a bunch of fabric. So that's why there's a new chalk mark right there. So now what I have to do is measure from here all the way down and around. Measure from the neckline down to the length you want for the cloak, plus seam and hem allowances. Mine was going to be off because of the neckline being off, but that was all right because I added 1 inch extra in length. I like to do this when I can in case something should go wrong. Both the cape and the hood are doubled up and on a fold here, but just for the front of the cape, I split it right down the center for the cape opening. Then I quickly determined the right and wrong side of the fabric, and when I say quickly, I mean the opposite of that. It was really difficult to tell. I pinned the side seams together with what I hoped was wrong sides together in order to make French seams because the Tale of Red Riding Hood seems to have originated in France, so I felt obligated to make French seams. Not because they're sensible and because they finished the seams so tidily, that was just a bonus. Then it was time to address the matter of the neckline, which was annoying, but a super simple fix. I just get annoyed when I make mistakes. I'm annoyed quite often. What was not at all annoying was the experience of giving the cape a quick try on. As soon as you can try your project on during the process, do it. Because sometimes it can make you feel loads better about the whole process. I finished up the process of the French seams and turned the center front edges and the hem under twice. Because of the French seams, double foldovers can get rather bulky, so I like to give them a little trim before folding over, and there they are, the finished edges. So satisfying. Now it's time for the hood. Just gonna sew right along there and then attach them together right along this front edge. I don't know exactly what it is, but the joy I find in making a cloak is confusing to me. I remember the first cloak I ever made, and the one that I made that I had to sell, and the other one I made that I had to sell, and the other one. It made me so sad. Even though I made them with the intent to sell, they were difficult to part with. But enough about my troubles. Back to the construction. When I joined the two hoods together, I left about 1 1/2 inches unstitched at each edge of the hood. This would later be where I would insert some ties. Now it is time to sew the cape to the hood to make it a cloak. Cape plus hood equals cloak. Here's the cape, very big. Here's the hood, also pretty big. It's bigger than what I need for around my neck. I want to have this circumference be about 24 inches. So in order to make that work, I'm going to have to gather both the hood up and the cape up to fit into 24 inches. But I need an anchor for that. So I'm going to cut out a strip of fabric that is 24 inches long and just about 1 inch wide. And while I was in the process of cutting out a strip of fabric for that, I cut out 2 more strips for ties. To make ties, I just fold in half, stitch, trim, turn inside out, and finish the ends with some hand stitching or fabric glue, and they're ready to be installed. But first, here's my strip of fabric. I'm just going to pin it to the inside of the hood. Yes, the inside, the wrong side of the fabric, which is the right side, the correct side in this case. All right, now I just stitch along here. Now I attach the cape to the hood. I'm going to take it and attach it to the cape, right sides together. And I'm going to have to pull the cape up quite a bit more. Where are my pins? Here they are. It is now almost a cloak. Almost, but not quite. I still have to sew the lining down right along the neckline. But before I do that, I need to insert some ties. So here's where the hood meets the cape. Just going to sew it right in here. I'm just going to fold that over, and then this gets sewn right there. I'm just hand stitching it in right now, and then once I'm all finished, everything is closed up, then I'll just go back and top stitch it right there so it's nice and neat. Now we can close it up. Once I get all of this pinned, I'm just going to hand stitch it into place. Okay, got it pinned. Now to stitch it. It's finished. There's the inside of the hood. Complete with a piece of leaf. Don't know where that came from. So there's the inside of the hood. Oh, okay, this turned out even better than I thought it would. I'm quite pleased with it. All right, so it is finished.
I just smacked myself in the eye.
So it is finished. However, I think I'm going to go ahead and do something that I do not usually take the time to do, and that is top stitch with a fancy stitch. That sounded weird. Did I say that weird? I'm going to top stitch with a fancy stitch. 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 Top stitch with a top stitch with a pretty stitch. That's easier. Right along the edge, the hem, all the way around. It'll be the same color thread, so you really won't be able to see it very well, but I'll know it's there, and I think that'll add just a little bit of detail. And you'll know it's there, even if you can't see it on camera. So we'll both know. Yeah, I like it. All right. Here we go, top stitching. Here are the practice stitches. I really did like this one. And this one's pretty too. And I really like this, but I think I will save this for a different project. I think the winner is this one. The top stitching started off a pleasurable experience, but I was soon struck with the reality of just how slow the machine could move with this stitch and how much space I had to cover. Finally finished. Was it worth it? I guess so. Oh yeah. That is making me feel so much better. Feeling like I'm actually making progress. One piece is completely complete. And I'm actually very pleased with how it turned out. It is nearing the end of the day, so I don't have a whole lot of time left to work on this, but I have a little bit of time, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started on the skirt. The first thing to do is measure the beige bed sheet, or would you call this taupe? Did you know that taupe is the French word for mole, although the correct pronunciation is technically le taupe? The spelling is the same when referring to the animal. So in English, a mole is a mole, but in French, a mole is le taupe. And in English, a mole is a mole, but in French, a mole is le grand de beauté. But if you wanted to use the Old English, I think you could call this little fella a moldy-warp. Though in some areas I think people may have said mody. The more you know. I am not a linguist, do not take this as factual, I just think words and languages are fascinating. Always check the facts, folks, do your own research. What I've got here is 90 inches by 70. No, that's not right. I have 94 inches by 70 inches. That's why I write it down. Yeah, I just measured it and I just forgot. 94 inches by 70 inches. Excellent. It's got such a nice weight to it. It is, I think, 40-60 polyester cotton blend, so it's not the best quality of fabric, but this isn't too shabby. I really like the color with the red too. Anyway, focus. So I'm going to use the 94 inches as the width, and then 35 inches will be the length. That means that I have 94 inches doubled, so about 188 minus seam allowances for the skirt. That's fantastic. And it is going to kind of be on the short side, but I was kind of wanting it to be shorter. Maybe not that short, but you know, that's not terrible. That'll work. Okay. So it was simply a matter of straightening edges and then cutting some rectangles for the body of the skirt. For the waistband, I cut slightly less rectangles by adding the feature of an indentation. For this would be a high-waisted skirt and needed to conform a bit more to the shape of the waist and the lower rib cage. Also, it would need to fold in half. I cut out a layer of some more fabric for stability and attached that by basting it all along the edges before sewing all of the pieces together. Then I slipped into my favorite pajamas and started stitching up the side seams. I had a grisly day ahead of me the next morning and I knew I needed to get some sleep, but the sooner I went to bed, the sooner it would be morning, so I just kept on sewing. I got the grisly part of the day out of the way, and I was feeling quite spent by the time I made it home, but the day wasn't quite through, and I was determined to persevere and accomplish, so I sat down and continued on some skirt work. After I pulled the gathers to fit the voluminous skirt into the waistband, I made a little casing at the left and right center back seam so I could insert a little piece of boning. And then I removed the boning because I forgot to stabilize the waistband with a piece of interfacing in preparation for the eyelets because this was going to be a lace-up skirt. I reinserted the boning and gave the seam allowance a little trim to prevent bulkiness right where the bottom eyelets would go. I ended the day with hand stitching the inside of the waistband down. Well, part of it. I ended up finishing it the next morning. After that, I could insert the eyelets. And after inserting the eyelets, I set to cutting out a long triangular-esque shaped piece of fabric. 2 of them, actually. I stitched those together, turned it right sides out, and then closed up the opening. That was to be hand-stitched right along the back opening on one side. And after that, I fought the desire to melt into a puddle of slime. It's a bummer when you really want to do something but your brain and body are saying, nah, not feeling it. But I pressed on, with the speed of a non-Disney version of a sloth. All sloths move slow, but the cartoon versions do seem to have just a bit more oomph behind them, and I was running on oomph fumes at this point. The hem was a simple turnover press and turnover press again, but it was a length of about 185 inches, so it did take some time. I'm just gonna press this and then run a stitch all along the bottom, and I will be finished with the skirt. Well, I should find some lacing for the back, but after that, I will be finished with the skirt. And then I can start working on the stays. Well, start working on constructing them because I already made the pattern. Woohoo! Unless I pull the pattern out and decide, oh, this is trash. I cannot use this. I must start over. That happens a lot. A lot. So this is the string I want to use for the lacing. However, it is a little bit flimsy, so I think I'm going to go ahead and braid it together to make a stronger lacing. And with that, the skirt was finished, the cloak was finished, and then it was time for the stays. But that would have to be on a different day. It's Stays Day. This, of course, is the fabric for the outside of the stays. And then I'm going to use this pillowcase that came with this bedsheet as the lining. And then this is going to be inside those layers for sturdification purposes. This is something that my mom had and she didn't want it anymore. She was getting rid of it and said, you can have it if you want. I said, yes, please. I really don't like this fabric. I'm kind of regretting my decision to get the poly blend. I feel like I should have gotten the cotton one instead, but it just wasn't the shade of brown that I wanted. And it's more expensive. I'm planning on perhaps destroying it, so I didn't want to put too much money or effort into this. But I really don't like the feel of it. I'm a little bit of a fabric snob, actually. And it's not like I'm not trying to be snobby. It's just the feel of it. The feel of it against my skin is kind of not great. This is a poly blend. And I like this. I love the feel of it. It actually feels like such better quality than this. The percentage might be different, but they're both poly cotton blends, so I'm not snobbish about it according to, what it's made of. It's how it makes me feel. So I feel like it's not being snobby. That's being in tune with my feelings. Anyway, so I just got to pull this apart, and then I'm going to cut the stays out of this, and I'm going to do 2 layers of this. Also, I need some bias bindings, so I'm gonna have to cut out bias strips and make bias tape because I think it should be the same color as this. I tried some different colored bias tape with it and I didn't like that. So I think it's gonna be the same color. I don't know if that's the right decision or not. Let's get started. I've already run into a slight problem, very slight though, easily remedied. This piece simply won't fit onto this fabric, whether I fold it this way or the other way. The whole piece just won't fit on the fabric, but that's totally fine because I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it off right here, and then this one I'll cut as its own piece. Put it right about there, so then it'll be totally fine. Where are my pins? The frustrating or hilarious, depending on how you look at it, thing about this is how I determined the pillowcase would work as lining was I laid the pattern on it before I took it apart, and so all I had to do was lay it out the same way after deconstruction. But I completely forgot, so there was another way to lay the pieces in order to cut the back piece as one single piece, and I completely spaced on that. Hilarious or frustrating? Take your pick. I've got all of the pieces sewn together, lining and the outer fabric all sewn together. What I want to do now is something I've been putting off. The waist tabs, I feel like they're just a little bit too close, but I didn't want to make them too far apart. But yeah, I think they're too close, and I'm going to go ahead and trim them a little bit so there's more space in between each one. I stitched all the side seams together, and I wanted to do more, but some chores had to be accomplished, one of which was putting clean sheets on the bed, and that's like a super long process. So by the time that was complete, it was after 9, and there is a strict rule within this space that lights out is at 9 p.m. Well, at least the majority of lights. So it was hand stitching by candlelight for me. And when I say candlelight, I mean puck light. I purchased these puck lights for something that didn't work out, and instead of returning them, I realized I could use them as portable lights for evening sewing. Also for slaying the housefly that has been driving me to madness all afternoon and evening. Versatility. Welcome back. Today I have no idea. I really wanted to work on this yesterday, but I got distracted. I had some errands to run, chores to do, and I really wanted to help my mom with some organizing stuff, and that took way longer than we thought it would because we were sabotaged by squirrels. We were trying to organize something on a shelf that has pegs that you stick into holes and then hang stuff on them, and the holes that the pegs go into are slightly larger than your average acorn. I don't know if you've ever tried to get acorns out of slightly larger than acorn-sized holes, but it's very difficult and time-consuming and frustrating. But we got it done, and after that I had more chores to do, and it just never ends. So I am going to be able to work on this today. I am still working on the stays because steps. So many steps. I'm going to be sewing the lines for, wow, I can't think of words today. Channels. There we go. There's the word. Okay, so what I have to do today is sewing a bunch of rows of stitching to make channels for the boning. Yay. A lot of times when I try to do several layers of fabric, it shifts when I use the sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and hand baste some sections, and then I will stitch the lines with the sewing machine. I actually do enjoy the process of hand stitching for the most part. The thing that makes me not enjoy it is the notion in the back of my mind that I am wasting time. I think no matter how much you want to disbelieve a falsehood, when it is so deeply ingrained in your society, it's hard to shake it. And an idea that seems to be perpetually gnawing at me is the idea that I shouldn't be spending time on something if I am not earning money from it. So making things purely for my own enjoyment is fun, but seasoned with a sense of guilt. I'm working on it. Anyway, I whipped up some bias tape real quick using a handy dandy little tool I found on clearance, maybe a year ago, maybe more. I never, well, hardly ever, seem to use tools as soon as I purchase them. I have to purchase them, put them in a drawer, forget about their existence, discover them again, not need them at that moment, so close the drawer, forget about their existence again, and rediscover them, and eventually use them, maybe. And I must say I've never used a bias tape maker before, but I did find it fairly helpful. For boning, I used a mixture of plastic bone and some steel bones from the first corset I ever made. Since it was falling apart, I decided to deconstruct it and salvage the steel bones. It was a pretty old corset, so most of them were bent, but that was fine by me. I didn't add too much boning because the duck fabric was going to offer a good amount of stability. Man, look at that, I drew blood again. I do not know how that happened. I wasn't even working with anything sharp. Once I inserted all of the boning, I could close up the top edge with some more bias tape, which I did with the machine for one side and by hand for the inside. Then it was eyelet time. And wow, the stays were complete, which meant the outfit was complete and ready for a reveal. Okay. Well, almost ready. So I am almost ready. Excuse me. This place is a mess. Anyway, I'm almost ready to go outside and film a reveal. I'm really running out of light. I've got to hurry, but I just wanted to show you this is gonna have to do for the blouse. I wanted to make a shift and I just didn't have time, but I do have this. So hopefully this works. I'm a little nervous. It's going to look absolutely dreadful, but I don't like it. I never wear it, and so I'm not real nervous about it getting destroyed if, you know, I should get the fake blood on it. Did I tell you about the fake blood? I'm using fake blood, so I won't be sad if it gets destroyed, but I'm not sure it's going to be the look that I really wanted, so this is the day I have to film the reveal though. If I don't film it now, the video is going to get pushed even further. So let's hope this works. I'm going to get dressed.